What's up everyone, and welcome to my first recap video of Norway Chess 2021. Norway Chess, as its name suggests, is a chess tournament in Norway. It's a double round robin, so all players play each other twice. And it's a tournament featuring World Champion Magnus Carlsen, his challenger for the upcoming World Championship match, Nepomniachtchi, Sergey Karjakin, who recently finished second in the recent World Cup in Sochi, Richard Rapport, the number 13 in the world, Alireza Firouzja, and Aryan Tari, the number 2 in Norway. So in this game, we'll have Aryan Tari play against Richard Rapport. I forgot to mention that the time control for this event is 2 hours for the entire game. But after move 40, the players get a 10 second increment. However, if the game ends in a draw, the players play an Armageddon, in which white gets 10 minutes and black gets 7 minutes. But there's a 1 second increment after move 40. So more about that later. And the point scoring system is a bit weird. If you win in classical, you get 3 points. And if you draw in classical, both players get 1 point. But if you win the Armageddon, you get an additional half a point. Anyway, without further ado, let's have a look at this game between Aryan Tari, supermodel and chess grandmaster, and Richard Rapport, the number 13 in the world. So Aryan started things off with the move 1e4. Richard plays the French. Aryan goes d4, d5, and knight c3. So this is how Aryan usually plays against the French. So I guess Richard was expecting this. He plays bishop b4, the Wiener variation. The other main lines black has is knight f6. After which white usually goes e5, knight of d7, and f4 to try to defend his center with knight of 3. Like knight c6, he goes bishop e3, he wants to keep all this together. Another option for black is to take on e4, but this is a bit passive, because after white takes, white gets this pawn structure. The pawn on e4 gives white more space than the pawn on e6 that black has. So Richie goes bishop e4, and here Aryan goes for the safe option. He takes on d5. Now another move here is the move e5, but this usually gets pretty sharp. Black can go c5 and attack the center, or he can play b6, bishop a6, trying to trade off those bishops. So, but this is the main line, and with this move white really tries to grab the bull by the horns. But instead of that, Aryan takes on d5, Richard recaptures, Aryan goes bishop to d3, and Richard goes knight to e7. So Aryan goes knight f3, which is a fine move, but a tricky move here is the move queen h5. It stops black from going bishop f5, because that square is now guarded twice, and it also stops black from castling. If you were to castle here, well, that's too bad. White is checkmate on one move. So queen h5 would be a tricky move online, because maybe some of your opponents would pre-move short castles. And it's not that easy for black to get rid of this queen around here. If you go g6, then you weaken all your squares around the king side, so you don't really want to do that. White can drop back, followed by bishop h6. So that's an option, but Aryan chose knight f3. Richard goes bishop g4, pinning the knight. Aryan goes h3, and Richard wants to keep the pin. He goes bishop h5. Now Aryan castles, and Richard goes knight to c6. So he's putting pressure on this pawn on d4. And Aryan goes bishop to e2. Trying to neutralize the pin on this knight. Richard castles, and now Aryan goes knight h4. So he felt like the pressure on the knight was a bit annoying. So he goes knight h4, going for trades. And here, if black takes on e2, you don't want to take on e2 with the queen, sorry, because that hangs the pawn. But instead of that, you just recapture with a knight. And now the position is fairly symmetrical. White can go c3, maybe go knight g3 if the bishop drops back, bishop f4 for example, and it's pretty even. So I don't know, this was the first game of the tournament, usually a bit of a nervy affair. Maybe Aryan was trying to play it solid, but Richard had other plans. Instead of trading on e2, he took on c3 first. A very clever move. Now if white takes on h5, black takes on d4, so white loses a pawn. You don't really want to do this. So Aryan recaptured on c3, but now Richard traded. And so here he's given white these double pawns on the c file. So he goes rook e8, lining up the queen, the rook with the queen. Aryan goes queen f3, and he goes queen d7. So Richard wants to play on the light squares, that's why he puts the queen there. Aryan goes bishop d2, and Richard goes knight a5, a very good move. He wants to put a knight on c4, where it can never be challenged, because white cannot play b3 or d3. So this is what we call an outpost in chess, an advanced square in the opponent's position, where a piece cannot be challenged by the opponent's pawns. So Aryan goes rook a1, activating the rook, knight c4 and bishop c1, and Richard goes a5. You might be wondering what the point is, but we'll see that shortly. After queen h5, he went rook to a6, activating the rook this way. He wants to swing the rook over and contest the e-file. So Aryan goes knight f3, trying to go for some tricks with knight g5, but Richard goes g6, kicking the queen back, and f6, taking away squares from this knight on f3. So Aryan goes rook e2, trying to double. Richard goes knight f5. Aryan trades and goes queen f4, hitting the pawn on c7. So Richard goes back to d7, defending the pawn. Rook e1. And now Richard wants to play rook e6, but the problem is if he does that right away, now Aryan can take, and now he can take the pawn on c7, because the queen is no longer guarding it. So instead Richard plays g5, hitting the queen. Now you don't really want to play queen h2. Yes, you do keep an eye on the pawn on c7, but your queen will be very passive here. And black can do stuff like rook b6 and infiltrating your position this way. So the position is really unpleasant. So Aryan went queen to g4, and Richard went rook e6. Now, some of you guys might be like, wait a second. He's just hanging a knight. But if you take, guess what? You got jebaited. Black can take, and now you lose your queen. So GMs don't just hang pieces like that. And if you take an e6 first, now the knight is defended again. So Aryan goes h4, trying to soften up the king side. Richard trades and goes queen e6, hitting the knight d3, and now he comes up with a very strong move. He goes queen to e4. So with this move, black is offering a queen trade, and it puts white in a difficult spot. If you step the queen back, now this pawn in h4 is hanging, and black can just take it. Oh shoot. Why do bad things happen to good people? But if you trade, which is what Aryan did, now black has transformed his pawn structure from a, let's bring this back. So here black has a 4 versus 4 pawn structure on the queen side, right? And it's 3 versus 3 on the king side. But after this trade, black now gets a 4 versus 3 majority on the king side. Now white also has a 4 versus 3 majority, but the pawns are doubled on the c file, so it's more like 3.5 versus 3. So you could argue that black is practically up half a pawn. So Aryan goes knight c5, Richard takes on h4, Aryan takes on b7. You can take on e4, but if black steps the king up, he now has a 3 versus 2 majority, while once again your majority on the queen side is kind of blocked. And so Aryan takes on b7. Now Richard brings the knight back. So after knight c5, he can defend the pawn on e4. Aryan goes g4, trying to block the king side. Richard goes king f7, king g2, king g6, a4, and Richard goes h5. He wants to get rid of this pawn on g4, so then he can start pushing the f-pawn forward. Aryan trades, king g3, and Richard goes f5. He wants to start pushing forward on the king side. Aryan goes knight e6 and f4, and here Aryan makes the correct decision. He decides to give up the bishop on f4, because the bishop is fairly passive here anyway, right? The knight is blocking all of its squares. This bishop is basically dead. And if you go back, then your position is just so passive. Black can go king g4, for example. Black can even give up this pawn, because your pawn on a4 is lost, and I can block on c4 with the other knight. And after black takes here, then he can start pushing this pawn forward. So Aryan makes a correct decision. to give up the bishop. And now Richard comes up with a very clever move. Now you might think like black should take on f4, but after you take, this would activate the king, which gives white much better drawing chances. So Richard first gives a check with the knight, pushing this king away, and now he takes. So Aryan takes a pawn, Richard goes king h6, and Aryan goes back to e6 to try to go after the black pawns on the queen side. Richard goes knight e7, and I believe this is where Aryan makes the decisive mistake. After this, the game is lost and there's no way back. In this position, Aryan really should have activated his king with the move king to g4. Now black can go knight to d5, which does a really good job of defending this pawn and attacking this pawn, but white can step up with the king once again. Black can take the pawn on c3, but white takes on c7, and black's up at knight, but white has 2 pawns for it. And as you can also see, the pawns on the board start disappearing. Black only has 2 pawns left. And if white would manage to get rid of all the black pawns, then white has very good drawing chances, because if black has only 2 knights versus a king, that's a draw. Then there might be some situations where 2 knights versus a pawn win, but those cases are also quite rare. So Aryan really should have tried to activate the king, and he should have had pretty good drawing chances. But after he captures on c7, he's blocking this knight from coming to d5, but Richard now goes king to g5. And I should add that Aryan was probably getting low on the clock. Once again, both players get 2 hours at the start of the game, but once you run out of time, then after move 40 there's only this 10-second increment, which is really not a lot. So that was probably what was costing Aryan. So king g5, Aryan went back, but Richard goes king g4. Now note how the white pieces are dominated. This king is dominated by black's king, and your knight's also kind of dominated by this knight. You don't want to move the knight, because then knight d5 would come. So Aryan goes back, Richard goes forward, king e1, and now knight is c8. Richard wants to go knight to b6 and go after this pawn on a4. So Aryan goes knight e6, knight b6. He gave a check. Richard went king f4, he gave another check, king g4, knight c5. Defending the pawn, Richard went king f3. So he did a nice little triangulation, as it's called. And this puts Aryan in zugzwang. You cannot move your king over, because that would hang the pawn. And if you move your king to f1, then black goes something like knight d5, just going after this pawn, and everything just collapses. So Aryan went knight to b3, but that's hanging this pawn. He pushed d5. Richard went back, d6. Now you don't want to take this pawn, because once again, if you take here, white can take here. And if white were to get this pawn, then white has very good chances for a draw. Because it's unlikely that you'll be able to win with the 2 knights. But Richard had other plans. He just pushed his pawn forward. Knight at d4, king f5, knight b5. And now he took the pawn. Oh shoot, he blundered the knight. Oh, just kidding. He went a3, and his pawn is unstoppable. So yeah, quite a nice masterclass really from Richard, how he converted his advantage of the strong knight. Oh wait, the strong knight versus Aryan's bad bishop on c1. So yeah, very good start for him. Richard starts the tournament with a win. He's temporarily leading the tournament. Also because Sergey Karjakin and Jan Nepomniachtchi did not play the first game yet, because Jan wasn't able to travel in time to Norway. So yeah, hope you all enjoyed the video. Make sure to subscribe. Let me know in the comments what kind of videos you would all like to see next. And I'll see you all in the next one.